Hello my friends, happy Monday to you! The surviving game begins, which means we are going to survive the hell out of this week, all up until Sunday. Let's go my friends. And for the first, to get into the mood, I'll bring you a clip from Russia. This is every Russian spring, as you can see right here. Why are they taking these wooden things off the car? Well, I'll tell you. Because this is supposed to be a street, and people are supposed to be able to walk on the street. But since Russia, or Putin actually, all the 20 years he has been on power, has never invested in fixing the infrastructure or guiding away, for example, the snow thawing water from the city, which is very doable if you invest in it. All the water, as you can see, just remains where it is. The snow thaws and the water just inside the city, and nobody can walk anywhere ever. So they will just put these wooden floating thingies so people can walk on them. But old people don't have that good of a balance, so they fall in sometimes. Now this might sound funny to you right now, but if I tell you this is Russian reality every spring. They have a special season for 1 month, this water season. Now Europe has the same issue, but European cities and city governments have invested into guiding the snow waters away. There's special canals underground for this. But Russia and Putin don't really care. Alright, the funny part is over. Let's get to serious war stuff. Or is the funny part over? My friends, I'll bring you Russian Orthodoxy. Yes, Russia claims, Vladimir Putin also claims that Russia is the carrier of the traditional values in the world. This includes traditional Christianity, Russian Orthodox way of Christianity, also traditional marriage, traditional genders, man and woman. Well, about the Russian traditional marriage. Putin 4 years ago decriminalized home violence, which means that women are pretty much slaves of their husbands in their homes because husbands and home do beat their wives in Russia. Home violence is pretty wide sourced in Russia, and police is called sometimes not. If they get to the scene, they cannot do anything because Putin decriminalized it, meaning men have a right to beat their wives and nobody can do nothing about it. This is Russian traditional value. That's the family. Now let's get to the Christianity, which is the second pillar of Putin's power. Like Lenin said, opium to the people. Putin is controlling his poor masses in Russia via the Russian Orthodoxy. I'll read you a thread. The Russian Orthodox Church has ordered its priests to read a daily prayer for Holy Rus. Would you look at that? It's not Russia anymore, it's the Holy Rus. It's trying to revive the state, as in state with 3 pillars. The nationalistic pillar, we are the Russians. The religious pillar, we are the Holy Russians, and the Tsar. This is basically Tsarist Russia. The Holy Rus, asking God to oppose those who have taken up arms against Holy Rus and asking for victory to Russian weapons. Priests who refuse are being punished by being defrocked. The head of the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Grigory of Voskresensky, has issued a circular, which is the first public disclosed official church document regulating internal church support for the war. So Russian Orthodox is fully behind the war. They are the lengthening arm of Putin's FSB. They are basically a branch of the FSB cloaked in sheep's clothing, in a religious clothing, but they're actually all working with and in cooperation with the FSB. In the West also, if you know any Russian Orthodox churches in your country, then you know where the closest FSB powerhouse is. The Russian Orthodox Church leader, Patriarch Kirill, wrote the prayer, which has gone through a number of versions in the 2 years since the full-scale war in Ukraine began. It reflects Putin's ideology that Ukrainians are merely Russians with a sense of false identity. And this is being preached in every Russian Orthodox church. So if you think Russians are upholding Christian values and family values like they advertise themselves to do, bogus. If beating your wife is a family value, then Russia is leading in that in the world. If declaring your country above all other countries by the mandate of God, like the Holy Rus, which they just did, then Russia is upholding that value. And if you agree with that values, yes, then you do fit into Russian ideology. But a lot of people who are pro-Russian in the West, they don't really know what they stand for because they've never been to Russia. What you see here right on this video was 2 days ago the Russian biggest attack of armored vehicles in 2024. 36 tanks and 12 BMPs were used, and they attacked last time with such forces in Vuhledar in the last February, meaning 2023 February, where about vehicles a day were knocked out cold. Where in this one they used 36 tanks, 12 BMPs. We have seen nothing this big in 2024. Most of the vehicles were destroyed and about less than half turned back. This attack was repulsed, but this shows us that Russia sees that Ukraine is lacking weaponry, because this is the official communication of Ukraine, and they're trying to use that for their advantage. They're pushing, usually they use meat attacks, but now they use this massive armored assault, thinking that now it's the right time to penetrate through the defenses. They made a miscalculation. Ukraine still had ammunition and they destroyed half of them, and the other half ran back. Lol, my friends. My friends, it is finally here. Putin has signed the doctrine, or decree actually, to conscript 150,000 people into the army. Now, Russia conscripts people into the army 2 times. Russia has a mandatory conscription. Of course, a conscription which you can buy your way out of. If you're a Russian man 18 years old or above and you have a lot of money, you can just buy yourself out. It's like 5,000 or something. You gotta pay the right lawyer and the right guy, and you don't gotta go. But most Russians don't have that kind of money, so Putin signed this, and I'll read it to you. President of the Russian Federation, decree on the conscription of citizens of the Russian Federation for military service in April to July 2024, and on the dismissal from military service of the citizens undergoing military service upon conscription. Meaning the old conscripts will be released, but in reality they won't, because many of them will be pressured heavily to go into Ukraine as volunteers. By the federal law of May 31st, 1996, from April 1st to July 15th, 2024, carry out conscription for military service of citizens of the Russian Federation aged 18 to 30 years who are not in the reserve and subject in accordance with federal law. Number 2, so 18 to 30 years old will be conscripted. Now, I have to say this is not a mobilization. Every year it happens. It's a regular occurrence, nothing new about it. It's conscription. But just usually 1,000 troops at the time, young men into conscription service. This year, Putin signed the upper cap to be 150,000. So he enlarged it. And of course, he communicated that none of these men will be sent to Ukraine. But we all have seen reports by the conscripts themselves that they are heavily being pressured to sign the document that they want to go to Ukraine voluntarily. So Putin hasn't mobilized yet, but the hidden mobilization is going on everywhere. Some factories have to send a certain quota of workers. Conscripts are heavily being pushed to go into Ukraine as volunteers. Immigrant workers are being rounded up in Moscow and St. Petersburg to send to Ukraine if they have any kind of issues with their papers. Many of them do, as in every country. So Putin is getting men everywhere and anywhere without declaring mobilization. Because last time he did it, it backfired really bad. It was really painful. So now he's just scraping the barrel as much as he can without officially declaring it. My friends, I gotta say it, Vive la France, because French are, I don't know what they're doing, maybe they're waking up to their Napoleonic era pride to stand up to Russia and taking out the old feud with Russia when Napoleon went to Russia and was harassed all the way back by the Cossacks and lost the Grande Armée. I don't know how to say it, Grand Army, you know. Well, I'll read you the report. France to transfer hundreds of armored vehicles and missiles to Ukraine. The Defense Ministry of France. French Defense Minister Rehi noted that these are armored vehicles currently in service of France. So they are right now in active French service, and they will be sending them to you. But they're going to be replaced with newer ones. Hundreds of units will be transferred in 2024 and early 2025. And this is about 8 months from now. So this is already a long-term commitment. And we have even longer-term commitments from European Union members. So Putin's scandal that the West will not support Ukraine long-term has already failed. Thanks to countries like France here, recently truly carrying European states, Great Britain and France, they have been carrying the aid from the EU to Ukraine, the leading. Of course, Poland is the hegemon of that. We're not talking even about Poland. According to Rehi, France also wants to help strengthen Ukraine's air defense, so it is preparing a new batch of Aster-30 anti-aircraft missiles for the SAMPT air defense systems. These systems are an analog for the Patriot system, so they're very modern and very accurate, and unfortunately the missiles are very expensive, and no country in the world has many of them. So France sending them is a true gift to the Ukrainians. And recently, I gotta say, my respect points for French, they're actually showing that they're following through. It's not a talk anymore. They have behaved according to these words. My respect is through the roof for the Rehi and also President Macron. Also, in this communication, weapon systems that are still working and were to be decommissioned in the coming years will be replaced now and sent to Ukraine. So the old ones will be replaced faster to be able to send to Ukraine. This is what France is. This is what every European country could be doing, but they're not. Estonia was doing that, of course, from the first day of war. We sent all our javelins almost. Everything. We need them to destroy Russian tanks. We sent them. The only reason we in Estonia have weapons is to destroy Russian armor. Now, if Ukraine is doing that for us, of course we're going to send everything. But France is following up now. Merci beaucoup. My friends, now I'll bring you a little bit of giggles. To laugh a little bit. It's Monday. We need to get into good mood because we need to survive. A T-55 tank which took part in the brutal suppression of the Hungarian anti-communist uprising in 1956 was shot on the territory of Ukraine. See, Budapest, 1956. Thousands of civilians died. Nikita Khrushchev sent in the Soviet army to push down the civilian protests against oppression. They wanted democracy, they wanted freedom. But then the tanks, these very tanks, they were very modern and new back then. And now they're 68 years old and they're still being used in Ukraine. My friends, we all know the Russian Volunteer Corps. They have entered into Russian territory of Belgorod for many times. Always fun to watch that. But I didn't even know Polish Volunteer Corps exists. It does. And in this video you can see they're side by side pledging a similar vow to liberate. They have the same call. And they're fighting side by side. That has happened many times in history where Polish and Russians are fighting side by side. But it never happened voluntarily. That's the thing. It never was voluntarily. Polish were always used and conscripted to be in the Soviet army against their will. Now it's voluntarily for the very first time in history. I'll read you what they say in the video. For the first day of the creation of the Polish Corps, its soldiers stood in the same role as soldiers of the Russian Corps, given to carry out combat tasks, and we'll go further together to victory. That was said by the commander of the Russian Volunteer Corps, who is a legendary dude. I like him. The thing is, the biggest country at one point in Europe was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And they were so powerful that they threatened both the orders of the Germans in the Baltic states and also the Muscovites back then already. They threatened both and they conquered both. They were so powerful. So they fought against each other. So the Polish have been fighting against the Russians for the most part of the history that Poland or Polish people have existed. Now they're fighting side by side, and not like in the First and Second World War when they were forced by the Tsar or by Stalin to be in the army. Now it's voluntarily, which is beautiful. It's beautiful, my friends. My friends, there's a story with this next one, these photos. It's a funny one. Russia's produced a lot of missiles in MLRS missiles, the ones that go from the unguided rocket launchers. But the thing is, a few batches were totally faulty, defected rockets. They're not missiles, they're rockets. And instead of fixing the production system and fixing the faults, they decided they still want to use them because, of course, Russians are lacking ammunition like the Ukrainians. So about the thousands of rockets that were produced faulty and couldn't be shot from the proper MLRS systems, they had to be new, had to be made. And this is what you can see actually on the screen. These are special made infantry versions of MLRS for the faulty rocket badges they produced because they don't want to waste them because they're having issues with ammunition. As you can see, just a thing on the ground with one rocket inside. It's not even guided, it's a dumb rocket, so you just physically aim it and shoot it, and it goes. It's a very stupid weapon. If it hits, it hits. It's painful, but it doesn't hit, let's be honest. The whole point of the Grad system in Russia, the MLRS, which are on top of like tank chassis, is that they saturate an area heavily with rockets. If you shoot one at a time and it's defected also, the rocket is defected, this weapon has no proper use. It doesn't do anything. Remember the Nazi Volkssturm towards the end of the World War II, who were issued cheaply mass-produced weapons or stuff lying around in the warehouses from World War I? This reminds me of that exactly. Look at this stuff. It's... What the hell is it? My friends, on this video we can see an anti-tank ditch 40 kilometers long from Zaporizhia defensive line. Ukrainians are building defenses in the depth. Look at this. No tank and no infantry fighting vehicle can get through that. Of course, if they fill it up, they can, but by that time they'll destroy it. Mostly they'll destroy it even before they reach this kind of ditch. It's about 10 kilometers behind the front line, so Ukraine has strong, extremely strong static fortifications behind the front line that exists now. So even if this front line they would have to retreat, they don't have to retreat past this defensive line, because this war is very conventional. It is like Second World War. Tanks are being used daily. And this is everything that stops tanks. Just a physical barrier. And Russians have done it in the name of Surovikin line. Very good line, unfortunate. And now Ukrainians are doing it. Donbas line and Zaporizhia line. I mean, there's no way in hell nothing comes through that if there are firing sectors with artillery on top of it. And Ukrainian blockhouses, as we can see, defensive positions with anti-tank groups. There's no way. They haven't even reached those defensive lines anywhere, the Russians. Talking about Ukrainians maybe being forced to retreat behind those defensive lines that they have built out now. Zelensky made a pretty controversial video speaking the truth of their armed forces and the situation of it and how much do they need aid. With that, he's taking a huge risk because immediately Russians read into that communication and read out of it that, okay, Ukrainians are super weak, let's send this huge armored convoy, and they sent 36 tanks and 12 BMPs to charge in Novoprokopivka. Most of them were destroyed, so the situation is not that bad yet. But I'll read you Zelensky's quotes from that video, and you can see it on the screen also. If you're not taking steps forward to prepare another counteroffensive, Russia will take them. That's what we learned in this war. If you don't do it, Russia will do it. Next one. When Russia has missiles and we don't, they attack by missiles everything. Gas, energy, schools, factories, civilian buildings. If there is no United States support, it means that we have no air defense. No Patriot missiles, no jammers for electronic warfare, no 155mm artillery rounds. It means we will go back, retreat step by step in small steps. And we have seen it happening. Of course, Russians are paying the grand price for it, the greatest price, blood, but they don't care. Attack them 300s is the answer. When Russia knows we can destroy the jets, they will not attack from Crimea. It's like with the sea fleet. We pushed them from our territorial waters, now we will push them from the airports in Crimea. We lost half a year while Congress bickered. We can't waste time anymore. Ukraine can't be a political issue between the parties, he said. This is how Zelensky sees it and how the truth is. Ukraine is able to defend quite well with everything they're making, everything they have, but there will be no offensive capabilities then, and also they will have to retreat step by step very slowly. Now, my friends, from this grim news, we will jump to Sweden because good news comes from that, and I want to leave that to the end. It was a bit worrying to see any news about the Gripen fighter of Sweden after Sweden's NATO membership was approved 3 weeks ago. Many of us were expecting that a decision would be made very fast after that. However, we now know that it is still on the table. Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson stated in an interview yesterday that Sweden is still considering the possibility of supplying its Saab Gripen fighter jets to Ukraine. The deliberations are ongoing with the fighter jet coalition, of which Sweden is a part. Now, Ukraine is supposed to get F-16s now in the matter of 3 to 4 months. I mean, it's so close. We have been waiting for it for a year. And now it's so close. But they will not get a big number of them. So Saab Gripen fighters would be a good use good addition to it. It's very difficult to have an air force because it's so expensive, and jets are one of the most heavy maintenance weapons in the world. You gotta fly, then you gotta maintain for hours. And if you have one car, F-16s, right? You maintain them. You have Saab Gripens, you gotta maintain them also, and it's different systems. So you gotta have 2 different crews, everything doubled the cost and everything. It's a pain. Like, you can have 3 different versions of tanks, but it doesn't even compare having 3 different versions of fighter jets. That's another logistics hellhole. So Saab Gripens would help Ukraine big time, but it would be more perfect if just more F-16 would be given. My friends, now for the first time this week, and to survive the week, we're gonna read the Buy Me a Coffee member names. And not read, but butcher to oblivion. Evan Lang, Someone, Frank Limacher, Mark Telford Lapirov, Someone again. Thank you, Someone, for double membership. Thank you, my friends, and if you like it, you will become a member, monthly member also. Link is in the description below. Until the next video, my friends, make sure to subscribe and push the bell notification to be notified about the videos. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.